Premier League table right now. When action does return, we'll be seeing the Graham Potter era get underway. At Chelsea, the team he overtakes are currently in 6th, as you can see, in the table, and they are coming off that surprise loss to Dinamo Zagreb in the Champions League. We'll bring in Nadim Anua now to talk about this too, but I will start with you, Craig. How is Graham Potter going to fix this team?
Depends how broken you think it is. I mean, that's a difficult question. I don't know what he's going to do exactly with the personnel. He has a striker now in Aubameyang that was the signing of Thomas Tuchel, ironically, at the end, a player that he worked with before. He has the personnel, if everybody's fit, to chop and change, and obviously the latest scenario involving the death of the Queen is now through the postponements and potential further postponements, we don't know, is going to give him a little bit more time for these players to work on the training ground. But look, it's going to take him a little while to get to stamp his authority on this side. I'm super happy for him. Here's a guy that's went out. Most people know the story. Couldn't get a job, decent job in England or in Britain. Went over to Scandinavia, did a great job coaching over there with a very small club. Got this opportunity at Brighton off the back of a very pragmatic approach from Chris Hughton, one that didn't get the supporters excited, but generally kind of got the job done. Brighton wanted to change direction. It was a risk, but they did, and they got their full rewards for that, not only in league positions, but recruitment of players, sale of players, and performances on the field. You think about it. You know, he's sitting, what, is it 4th at the moment in the Premier League, or around there, Brighton?
Yeah.
Or Brighton, his former team now. But they sold Bissouma, who I'm a big fan of, to Tottenham and Cucurella in the summer, and they still managed to have a great start. They had a super finish, was it the highest ever finish you were talking about last year, to a league season, and yet part-way through that league season, the wheels fell off. They couldn't get the ball in the back of the net, yet still managed to finish strong. So I'm really excited about the fact that Chelsea haven't just gone out and plucked a retread from these big names around Europe who have been good managers, and some of them still are, and went, there's the next Chelsea manager, come in for a year or two. I'm excited with the fact, at least on the face of it, there might be a slightly longer term approach here.
Yeah, it's interesting, though, because obviously, as you're saying, the time that he's coming in, and there's been a few problems so far with Chelsea. With that in mind, Nadim, how big of a job is this for Potter?
Obviously, for him, you know, it's the biggest job that he's had. But in terms of Chelsea and their struggles, I don't think it's going to be like the biggest issue in the world. I think the style of play that he has, as I see it, it's not a million miles away from where Tuchel was beforehand. But I think the key bit in terms of the recruitment of him is the ability for him to make players better. I think when you look at the Brighton side that he's had over the past couple of years, like, he's maximising those players' potentials. And when they play in games against sides, very rarely do you see them being outplayed by the opposition, even though apparently the talent should be greater for them. So I think when he then gets the talent on board, if he can sort of hone in the sort of mentality that he wants and the style that he wants them to play in, then you'd expect the outcomes to be greater. And Chelsea, you know, for as much as they've not started the season as well as they would have wanted to, you know, they're in 6th. They're not a million miles away from being top, not a million miles away from being in the top 4. Obviously, they need to get past the mighty Man United to get in there, but they're not a million miles away from that whatsoever. So I think ultimately, it's just little details, like the result against Zagreb is a bad result. But for those players, maybe there's a bit of belief, maybe it's a new sort of like training method. And I think overall, like, managers, they do have a shelf life for as good as they are, is the impact at some point will wane. So maybe that was the case for Chelsea in this instant, and seeing somebody walk through the door who is a very well-respected manager within England, maybe he can be the person that can just give them that 1% extra. And when the margins are so small, that 1% can go so far. So I'm excited to see how he does, because this is by far the biggest challenge, and it just goes to show the route to the top sometimes isn't the way that we expect it to be.
As for Chelsea, Jules, is this a change in approach from them? Are they actually planning to try and have something more long-term in place?
You don't appoint Graham Potter if you want something short-term. This is not what he does. He builds things, and he has a philosophy that needs a bit of time to get implemented. And like the boys were saying, if he was to improve those players, you can only do that on a long-term basis. It's not going to happen in the space of 3 weeks. So obviously, and you don't give him a 6-year deal either if you don't think that this is worth it. So I think the new ownership and the people who have made that decision, Todd Boehly, clearly are thinking long term here, or certainly mid-term to long term. Let's put it that way. And I think it's a good choice if that's what you want. But then, can you stay 2 years without winning anything, for example? Can you be 2 years without Champions League football? Let's say that the Potter project takes 2 years to really start being successful. What happens in the next 2 years if it's not really working, if they finish 5th every time, if there's no trophies in domestic cups, for example? You'd have to stick with him, and it would be harder to stick with him then than to say now, oh yeah, this is a long-term plan, don't worry about result, don't worry about this, do your thing, we will let you do your thing, we will let you the freedom to do what you want, let's find a sporting director together, director of football together, all that kind of stuff. I'm all on board with that. But if in 2 years' time they haven't qualified for the Champions League, then I think they might have to revisit it. But then that's one for then. For now, I think it was a really good thing what they did in terms of who to come next after Thomas Tuchel. I think it was the perfect choice. They could have tried to get someone else, but I think he made a lot of sense. But now he will have to win. Even if you're ready to be a bit patient, he will have to win and be successful.
Was it fair, do you think, Nedum, on Tuchel, that he was sacked?
As far as sackings go, you never really get all the information. So whether something's fair or not, I'm not sure. I think the way that Chelsea are in this moment, it's not, it's obviously not them at their best. But then when you see the amount of time and money that was spent in the transfer window, bringing in new talent to replace the people that had left, you're thinking it's going to be a longer term thing. Because the window literally closed last week, I think it was, or within the last 2 weeks. So for him to lose his job, I understand the Zagreb result was a bad result. But realistically, does that now make them a bad side? Are they looking at thinking that they can't get any better? Is this the Chelsea at their peak under Tuchel? It didn't feel like that to me. But then in the same breath, I didn't spend the billions of dollars or pounds that were required to own a football club. And I guess for any ownership group, it's at the end of the day, it's going to be their decision about who leads their football club forward. And they must have decided enough was enough, and they thought this is the guy that we want going forward, and that's why there's that 5-6 year deal, and the hope that he will bring better times to Chelsea and bring player development along, which maybe they thought Tuchel wasn't really doing. So it did feel early, but like I said before, the fact that Potter has come in, it sort of quelled that sort of element of discontent about Tuchel being sacked as early as he did. And I think if we did see one of those familiar faces just being brought in for a short-term fix, like maybe in the past we saw with Chelsea, then perhaps that would be a bigger problem. But instead, the name Tuchel, for as well as he did, it seems like all eyes are on Potter now, and people are ready and really excited to see how he does.
We talked about this yesterday, Shaka, but he's getting some great players, as we've seen there. He's inheriting some great players in this side. What's the biggest hurdle he has coming into this team?
I think the biggest hurdle is just being accepted by the dressing room as being the leader. Coming in from Brighton into a dressing room like Chelsea's with the kind of egos that obviously inhabit that dressing room, it's about how quickly he gets that respect, how quickly they accept him as being the person who will be there and leading Chelsea in this certain direction for the next few years. That's the only uncertainty for me. I think he comes in and he does that, just given what we've seen from him before in his previous jobs. There's no question in my mind, and as inexact science as it is, as football coaching and football management can be, I think he gets the best out of Chelsea, gets his ship back on its rails, because it is a very good team. We are talking about a team that finished third behind City and Liverpool last season, that won the Champions League a season and a half ago, and despite the kind of scattergun approach to the transfer window this summer, did bring in a lot of talent. I think he harnesses that talent, gets the respect out of the dressing room. I think it works.
If memory serves me right, we're talking about a turnaround at Chelsea, if that's indeed... Well, they do need a turnaround. They need a turnaround in performance and results. It's a long season. It's just started and there's time for that. If memory serves me right, the turnaround was pretty quick at Brighton. It was a chalk and cheese approach. If you go back, for those people that watch a fair amount of Brighton, the approach of Chris Hughton and the approach of Graham Potter is black and white. It's chalk and cheese. One's extremely pragmatic and the other is very front foot. playing football from the back, different shape, everything. The other thing is, if you'd have said to Graham Potter when he was at Osterans, you'll be managing Brighton and Chelsea, he'd have laughed at you. So this is an unbelievable opportunity. But some of the rhetoric coming from Chelsea is a little strange. I mean, Todd Bowley reportedly in his cohorts had an eye on Potter from the middle of the summer. They were already having doubts about Thomas Tuchel back in June or July, which is very strange with the money they're giving to hit Thomas Tuchel to buy players when they don't have a sporting director. So all these messages are mixed about also, you know, Bowley and his cohorts and his investors knew about Graham Potter. Well, who's telling them? Because these guys don't know Graham Potter from anybody, really. I mean, so somebody's advising them on that front. And the other side of the coin from Graham Potter going in, it's not dissimilar to Nagelsmann at RB Leipzig going to Bayern Munich. And before people go downstairs and start typing, I'm not comparing. I'm just saying we had this discussion about Nagelsmann. He was interviewed about the scenario walking into the Bayern Munich dressing room, and he himself said he was nervous. At Leipzig, he was the big star. They had good players, but he was the star. Goes to Bayern, and you walk in at the time, it's Lewandowski, it's Müller, it's all these great players. It's frightening sometimes. So Graham Potter's taking this confident, and I'm sure he is a confident, self-assured guy with his ideas, but he's walking out of that Brighton dressing room, and now he's walking in, he's telling Thiago Silva what to do, he's telling Koulibaly where he wants him to stand, he's telling Reece James, who's now, you know, one of the best full-back stroke wing-backs in the game, N'Golo Kante, Pierre Aubameyang's in the door. You've got all these attacking players. It's a different conversation. It can affect a manager. And so it's not going to be easy for him. And those players have to listen. If 3 or 4 of those senior players don't listen and turn the other way, it's a huge problem for him. I hope he does not face that. We're not seeing that at Bayern with Nagelsmann. Certainly not. I don't think we'll see it with Graham Potter. But it can be a problem. Going from talking to players at one side of the Premier League, although Brighton are doing well at the moment, talking to players that are not at the same level to these superstars is a different ball game, and you might just have to do it slightly differently. But I don't see, unless it's some severe unprofessionalism here, I don't see. I think this is the best appointment with who was available that they could have made.
You've answered my next question. It feels like, with everything you're saying, that you would say that as well. You think that this was the best person
well,
for the
unless
job.
you're going to go out and get the Man City or Liverpool manager who's struggling at the moment, but we know he's a great... Unless you're going to go out and get one of them, or unless you're going to go out and bring in another guy like Nagelsmann from one of the top leagues around Europe, where do you turn? Where do you turn? You turn to a progressive manager who is... has a great opportunity, who wants to play football the right way, who's very self-assured and knows what he wants, but he's just not a big name. But that doesn't matter. It's about getting results. So I've thought he was in the line for a decent job for a long time. I just never felt it would be a job as big as this. I felt it would be a Tottenham who were looking. I felt it might have been a Newcastle, a West Ham, but maybe an Arsenal at the time, but I never felt it would be one of the real big cheeses in European football.
Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week. Subscribe to ESPN+.